Hey there, friends, YouTubers. I'm going to talk a little bit about what this channel is about overall for a second or two, meaning a minute, and then dive into like a little bit of geopolitics and then end up with some, I think, upbeat concepts. So, scrolling back here, um, I'm 62 and already someone right in that class ahead of me is just had a heart attack and died. And so we're getting together in cyberspace, the 2D friends, to reminisce and talk to each other some. These are kind of the first, you could say, lefties that Princeton ever let in. They had women for some years before they decided to experiment with like hippies and stuff. But, based on the meritocracy idea, SAT scores and so on, it shouldn't be that Princeton is just pandering to like oligarchs. So they decided to let in some riffraff with high SAT scores and all that. And I'm not claiming to be in that cohort because I was coming from the Philippines, more from a technocrat family. Um, I don't know that I would necessarily fit the description, but I ended up in the same 2 Dickinson Street anyway, and certainly in my own head, in my own mind, I belong there, whether demographically I did or not. Now, looking from outside my house here at Quinn, our C60 sculpture also, there's Quinn is the dog, I should say. There's Quinn, beautiful dog. Doesn't live here. We have had a dog live here, and this is my neighborhood, so-called Hawthorne District. Middle of the pandemic, and anyway, we have lots of people without houses in America because there's a game that's difficult, and a lot of people can't play it. And I'm not saying there's a lot of luck and family wealth and so on. People say rich a lot. They forget to say spoiled in the same. Let's just use the synonym. Rich or spoiled, same thing. Can be, right? Not all rich people are spoiled. Not all spoiled people are rich. But, that leads me to geopolitics, where it will in a second. What we cover here is philosophy. So we've talked a lot about Wittgenstein, and I show books quite a bit. I recommend books. I don't like read out loud from books. This one, though, is a graphic novel, right? It's a famous one, Logic Comics. So if you're like high school or above, I recommend you wade through this. It's not a chore to wade through it, it's a joy, and you come out knowing a lot more about your culture. Sam Hill, I'm just picking from the narrative. We've been just covering a lot of historical figures, and starting, I guess you could say, with Citizen Kane, who's fictional, but the Hearst Empire and Orson Welles, that's been important in this channel because it brings in movie making, and we look at pretty much everything we do as movie making, whether there's a camera there or not. You're kind of leaving a record, a trace of yourself, call it a scenario. So we're all living the movie of our lives, to use the cliche, but we're also making the movie of our lives. We're also making the movie of our generation, of our time. Conspiracy theories, a little bit. The fact that I'm in this book, not by name, but my old website, which is gone. Check out Great Pirates. Check out Grunch. Grunch. All right, so that's what the channel's been about, continues to be about. And then I wanted to get into geopolitics a little bit. So, political speculations. I'm thinking now that uh, Trump has lost the election, and Flynn is out of the box. I think, the lawyer that helped Flynn is the one that's running around with the most elaborate conspiracy theories. And I think that's what it would have been like under Flynn as National Security Advisor if he hadn't been roughly handled and sidelined by the national security apparatus. I've been in General Flynn's corner. In other words, I did this political cartoon around the time of Flynn getting sidelined. And so you could say I was always against the Russiagate campaign, right? I was never a fan of, what's his name, Adam Schiff or whatever. I never thought that the Trump people, I didn't like the Rachel Maddow coverage. I found her, talk about conspiracy theories, right? So I never took her seriously and nor watched any much. I mean, I'd sample just to remind myself why I don't watch Rachel Maddow. But anyway, I was in Flynn's corner, but I realized why Obama thought he was a nutcase, because he probably was, is, and his kids and so on. I mean, they spew out conspiracy theories pretty easily. They don't build conspiracies that effectively, which I would say you need to do to understand conspiracies. You need to be in them. It's like if you're not in one or two conspiracies, you're wasting your time. And don't talk about conspiracy theories if you've never been in a conspiracy. You have no idea. I don't want your opinion. I'm not interested. If you're not in a conspiracy, you have nothing to offer. Rhetoric. That's rhetoric. So, I'm a rhetorician. Now, the good news, that was my geopolitics, is here's me holding the Quaker Oats box. That's the hat I lost eventually, although it was returned to me. Another at once. The first time I lost it, a Princeton guy, it turned out, found it out in Lake Oswego and called me up and said, "Hey, I think I have your hat. I'll give it back to you, but we need to meet somewhere and play 20 questions," or something to that effect. Like he wanted, in exchange for bringing me the hat, he wanted to interview me. And it turned out we were like a year apart at Princeton, and he was an engineer and I was a philosopher. Anyway, in this memo to Quakers, which is also Scenario Planning 2020, slightly different picture and title, but otherwise the text is the same. Let's look at scenario planning. I think it's really easy now to take our great leap forward, to borrow a term from Maoist times. I was in China around the Great Leap Forward, actually, in the 70s. I'll tell you more about that some other time. Okay, I got it, all right. Scenario planning 2020. All right, so there's the concentric hierarchy, which takes a while to say, easier to just show. Little rhombic tricontahedron at the end. The story hangs on that one, right? That's your T and your E modules. Whereas your A's and B's build everything that's not fivefold here. And in terms of expressing volumes, we can use phi-scaled S modules and stuff like that. And that's kind of what I'm talking about here. I'm saying, we're on the brink of putting this in the curriculum, and it is in the curriculum here in cyberspace. And I'm as good a source as any. When you talk to math reform people, this is not on their radar, by the way. And it would involve, as I say here, we're one program away, like Sesame Street, from kids being fluent enough to know of their Dymaxion map, Fuller projection, and all those other conceptual tools he bequeathed to them that the, quote, corporate personae, limited liability master controller pseudo-adults, remember about spoiled, are now sitting on, withholding, deliberately suppressing, precisely because our American heritage is not consistent with the great tragedy scenarios they have in store for us humans. So there's a play on that, the difference between humans and the literally soulless corporate persons of legal fiction, right? The zombies, the ones that have no soul. They're corporations, they're legal fiction. That's all I mean, right? And they have programming put in back in the 1600s, the limited liability and all this boilerplate ancient circuitry, right, that we just rely on because our generation doesn't have enough self-confidence to reprogram or recode, right? It's like got to be the way it is because we have no idea how to do anything like a big corporation that doesn't have the same guts, right? It doesn't have the same limited liability, shareholders at all costs, whatever. It's like we've kind of surrendered that we have the intelligence to best the ancestors, right? Instead, we just kind of wallow in guilt sometimes. But that's all for the shrimp, right? That's not interesting stuff. I just wanted to link here because the great tragedy scenario stuff is talked about here, right? The law cap directors, the Dick Cheney types, right? They have no competence in terms of taking us into this better world. And I get the question is, why would introducing these whole number volume geometric things, these concepts, where's my GIF? Why would, I see it's coming back. Why would that make a difference? I mean, it's just a pretty pattern, almost like a test pattern on TV. It's a tautology, it's true. You can't refute it because it's not empirical. But how can a tautology in geometry help at all, right? What are you talking about? And the thing is, you have to use words like A and B modules. Those are little shapes. They have names. You know, introducing this brings it a vocabulary, and then you have to say where it came from, and then you have to rehabilitate Bucky Fuller. Whereas the last 40 years are about saying how he was a failure, he was too wacky, crazy kooky, blah, 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 right? You got the generation I grew up in deciding not to use this stuff. And so in the World Game Museum, we can just have a gallery of all the textbooks that were used in like 6th grade and above that didn't include any of this. And kids can just file through with their mouths open and surprised that 40 years would go by and, you know, such a monument to ineptitude, right? But we're turning the corner here, and the Quaker schools, which tend to be ahead, like Quakers started schools to get away from slavery and stuff, have their own schools, not have government propaganda about how slavery's okay, because that was, okay, slavery was okay before the Civil War, right? Lincoln had to pull the plug on it, partly just to get his advantage, to get that war over. But still, philosophically, Quakers have been out of step with a lot of their surrounding culture. Some of them will acknowledge that to this day. Others are the very pinnacles of the establishment. And that's been true too since Philadelphia. You know, Quakers are used to, after an initial period of persecution, they've also been running the show, right? In the 1700s with the Industrial Revolution, that was the heyday. I talk about that as another topic. In other words, we've roamed over a lot of topics, and I'm winding up here. C60 has been another one, a very cool one. You'll see lots of pictures, like we did earlier, of these balls stacked up in like a pyramid or in another shape. Where'd that go? Like this, right? Like this. So that's C60. And so there's another piece to it, which is to connect the balls to each other. And it creates a lattice that we talk about all the time here on this channel because it's part of this curriculum that anyone can phase in. You've got everything you need to succeed, basically, because once you start teaching this, it connects to everything else that we want to talk about. So yeah, it's just a test pattern, let's say. It has no meaning in itself. Let's agree for debating purposes, it has no purpose, except it gives you fantastic mnemonics. You can walk around with some brains, right? It gives you a better right brain, something to think about, right? I'm finding another picture to help you. Oh, let's see. So it's like you don't need to have any pity for the humans. They've got everything they need. And if they don't exploit it, if they don't use it, then it's their choice, right? They're not to be pitied. Don't pity the humans. They've got everything they need, and if they don't choose to use what they've got, it's because they're spoiled rotten, and good riddance in a way. All right, the picture I'm looking for, and I'm not finding right now, but it doesn't matter. This is a good one. This is the hexapent, right? If you don't know what a hexapent is at this point, why are you a teacher if you are? Don't even think about it, all right? Okay, I'll talk to you again in the next chapter. Ciao.